That's okay.
Yes.
So for anybody who has not been participating in the program every week or who hasn't met me already, my name is Brenda Sanders, and I am the executive director of an organization called Better Health, Better Life. And I'm also one of the organizers of the Vegan Living Program this year. I feel really qualified, I guess, and privileged to be able to do this presentation today because I've been a vegan for, this year will be my 18-year vegan anniversary. Thank you. It's been a wild ride, and I have been probably in every single place that everybody in this room has been. I came into veganism for health reasons, not for the environment, not for the animals, and I was vegan for years, and it was a struggle. I mean, I was still going around family members. I was still doing some of the holiday things and stuff, and with all the food and all the memories and all the nostalgia, and it's not easy to maintain the vegan lifestyle in the face of all of that. And then a couple of years ago, I became aware of my connection to other beings that we share the planet with. That was an interesting experience, and so I started to open up a little bit more to the plight of some of the other beings that are being used by us. And recently I've actually become an activist, and so I have actively gone out and tried to change the situation. Throughout that whole time, I have been through every different stage that anybody, all the pledges, you're thinking like, oh, you're the only one that's going through this thing or that thing. Like, we've all been through it, we've all been there. That's why this program is here, to help and support people who are interested in taking on this particular lifestyle. And so I feel qualified and I feel privileged to be able to get up today and stand before you and talk about some of these things. So why did I choose to do a lecture about sustaining veganism? In other words, staying vegan, right? In the time that I have been vegan, I've met a lot of people. And over and over again, I kept coming across these people who would come up to me and talk to me about my veganism. And I came across so many of them that I actually came up with a name, like a category in my head for these people. And they're called used to be vegans. And so these used to be vegans would come up to me all the time when they would hear that I was vegan. And they would say, wow, man, that's great. I used to be vegan, and this is the reason why I'm not vegan anymore. So there were a number of reasons why people would give as to why they weren't vegan anymore, but a few of them really stand out for me because I heard it so many times over and over again from people. And so the number one reason that people who used to be vegan but aren't anymore give for why they stopped being vegan is that they were with a partner who wasn't vegan. And so the conversation would start off like, well, I was still cooking meat for my husband, and it got too hard to make 2 different meals, and so I just went back to eating meat. Or my boyfriend was doing all the cooking, and he was still cooking meat, and so I went back. Or even people who have had like vegan roommates. They say, non-vegan roommates, they say like everybody was still eating meat in the house and it was just too hard. They went back. And so what I would think to myself when I would hear this reason is that these people probably were on pretty shaky footing with veganism anyway. And so being around meat and being around people who were eating meat and enjoying meat was enough to take them back over to the meat side, right? And then I hear about the reasoning for not eating a vegan diet anymore being that these people experienced some kind of trauma. Something traumatic happened to them and it caused them to go back to eating meat. So it could have been that they got into some kind of accident that caused injury to their bodies, or somebody close to them died. And so the conversation would look like, well, I was in the hospital and the hospital didn't have any vegan food, or people just kept bringing non-vegan food over to the house after my mother died or whatever. And so when I hear this, I usually think that it's a situation where a person has gone through some kind of trauma and they need to be comforted. And food, for many people, has good feelings and good memories attached to it. And so when these things happen to these people, they are searching for some kind of way to be comforted. And so this food is the way that they receive that comfort. The next most popular reason that people give as to why they aren't eating a vegan diet anymore is that there were unpleasant things that they were experiencing physically that they attributed to the veganism. So it could have been that they weren't losing the kind of weight that they wanted to lose, or they were doing bodybuilding and weren't feeling like they were able to build the kind of muscle that they wanted to build with plant-based foods, as well as people complain about flatulence and things like that, and how unpleasant that can be for everybody around them, and so they went back to eating meat. I even had somebody tell me, well, my nails started to break off, so I had to go back to eating meat. And so in that situation, I just feel like if they had tweaked a few things, like maybe done some research or talked to somebody who knew about vegan nutrition, that maybe instead of just scrapping the whole thing, they could have done some things to address those issues that they were having. Kind of like if you're driving a car and you start to hear a tapping noise from under the hood, you don't just pull the car over and like jump out and say, I'm never driving again, forget this, You look under the hood, or you take the car to somebody and have them look under the hood and diagnose what the problem is and then fix it. And so that's the way I feel about the vegan diet, is that there are lots of things that you can do. I know people who have figured out what to eat to speed up their metabolisms and burn fat. And I've talked to people who figured out how to build muscle off of plant-based protein. And so, just talking to somebody or doing your own research is a great way to really help yourself to stay true to this lifestyle. And then the last most popular reason that people have given over the years is that they just were inexperienced. They didn't know how to make the food. And so they say, like, I just didn't know what to eat. I didn't know what was vegan, what wasn't vegan. It was all confusing. I just didn't know what to do. And I mean, when I became vegan all those years ago, there were a lot fewer resources out there. These days, if you have internet access, if you go to Google and you type in VEG, vegan recipes will just like come up. Because I mean, that's how popular this lifestyle is right now. And even if you don't have internet access, you can go to the library. I've been to every library system in the area, and they all have vegan, not even just vegetarian, but vegan cookbooks and vegan resources available. And so, there's all this stuff out here. And so, these days, I don't even know if that's a completely valid excuse. I mean, there are vegans out here that you could ask. We are literally sitting around waiting for non-vegans to come up to us and ask us questions. Like our dream is that people will just walk up to us off the street and say, hey, you're vegan, help me be vegan. So at this point, I'm thinking that, if people are really serious about making this transition, that is definitely possible. Okay. So before I continue with the lecture, I would like to tell you guys something about myself, and then I would like to ask something of you. And what I'd like to tell you guys about myself is that I put a lot of value on common sense. Like, I don't have a bunch of graduate degrees, I don't have a bunch of letters behind my name, and I am not one of those people who worships intellectualism. Mostly because over the years that I've been on this planet, I've met some of the most intellectual people, and they have done some of the stupidest things. And so I really value common sense. I've seen people use common sense to transform them into better human beings. And I've seen people use intellectualism to justify doing some of the most atrocious, heinous, and horrible things that you could ever imagine. And the thing that I would like to ask of you guys is to just please be open-minded to the information that I present to you today. And I say that because I've done lectures, I've been a part of, I've sat in on lectures, and I know that when people present information kind of runs counter to your own lifestyle or your own belief system, it can be really uncomfortable, and you can, oftentimes I see people like start to tune the lecturer out or cover their eyes because they don't want to see that, or even just get up and walk out. So I would ask that instead of doing those things, if people could just like pay attention to the discomfort that they feel, look at like what was it that you saw, or what was it that you heard that made you feel uncomfortable? Where in your body did you experience this discomfort? Did you like feel a sinking feeling in your belly, or like goosebumps on your arms, or a tightness in your chest, or whatever? Like pay attention to that. And then another thing that I ask people to do when I do lectures is to honor that discomfort, because it's that discomfort that you feel that is your signal that you're still connected to the rest of us, that you're still connected to the rest of the world. Because when you see something horrible and you feel bad about it, it means that you're still with us, right? And so don't push that feeling away. Don't ignore that discomfort, right? Honor it. Because the more we push it away and we push it to the side and we ignore it, it becomes easier and easier to ignore the discomfort until you get to a point where you just don't feel anything at all. And there are some people who I've met who don't feel anything. And so this lecture is about reconnecting to everything else around you. It's about seeing the bigger picture and how that picture relates to veganism. So it's because of the used to be vegans that I meet and the potential future used to be vegans in this room that I decided to do a lecture about sustaining veganism by making connections. Because we're all disconnected, and I think that to a large degree this culture that we live in encourages that disconnection. So how does reconnecting and not being disconnected, how does that relate to veganism? The concept that I wanted to use our common sense to look at is dairy consumption. This is a cow. And this is a human. Now, as most of us, I think, learned at some point in elementary school science or whatever, cows and humans are both a part of the classification of mammals, right? And so one of the things that mammals have in common is that the females give birth to young, and then they produce life-sustaining food for that young in the form of milk, right? Contrary to what some people seem to think, cows do not just perpetually produce milk for no reason. They have to be impregnated. They have to have a baby. Just like human women give birth to human babies. And the same way that human mothers produce breast milk, so too do cow mothers produce milk for their babies. And that's easy. Like, we're all clear on that, right?
Yep.
All right. Strangely enough, since I have been doing these lectures, I've come across all these people who think, or maybe have been taught, I'm not sure, that cows are these like mystical, magical creatures that just perpetually are always producing milk, and so we are doing them a favor as humans by milking them. And I'm here to tell you that it's not true. Cows are mammals, just like all the other mammals that we know of on this planet. They have babies just like every other mammal. And yet, humans are the only ones that I know of that routinely drink the breast milk of another species. Now let's take our common sense a step further. So we're told that we humans, have to drink the milk of a cow so that we, humans, can get the calcium that we need to be healthy. First of all, how does that even make sense? I mean, these bodies that we have, I mean, even though we treat them horribly and we do all kinds of horrible stuff to them, they do still tend to make sense. And so a human woman gets pregnant, has a baby, makes the milk to nourish the baby, and then at some point weans the baby away from the milk onto solid food. So please tell me at what point then human beings need to drink the breast milk of another animal in order to be healthy.
Good question.
And then, to make matters worse, and I've been doing this for a long time, so just bear with me. To make matters worse, when I talk to people who routinely eat and drink dairy products, and I say to them, well, would you drink human breast milk? They're like, ew, no, right? And I'm like, well, would you eat yogurt or ice cream that was made from a human woman's breast milk? And they're like, that's disgusting, right? And yet, they have these cartons and jugs and containers of the breast milk of a cow, another species, in their refrigerator. At least eating some yogurt or ice cream made from the breast milk of a human person from your own species makes a little bit more sense. I'm not saying it makes sense, but at least it makes a little bit more sense than what people are doing right now. That there is absolutely no logical, practical, or sensible reason for human beings to drink the breast milk of a cow, then the question becomes, why is there so much advertising out there saying that it's good for strong bones and teeth and does a body good, and they got the celebrities out there with the milk mustaches and all this stuff? Why?
Propaganda.
There we go.
Absolutely.
A 2013 Dairy Farms Market Research report revealed that in the US alone, dairy is a $44 billion industry. $44 billion is made off of the dairy industry in this country alone. Now, that's a big number. And a lot of times it's hard for us to really grasp, like, once you get past like $1,000, it's like, I don't know what that means. And so I want to just put this into perspective a little bit. There's a company called Dean Foods, which owns 29 different dairy farms, okay? The former CEO of Dean Foods made $22,533,094 in 2012. He made $22,533,094 in 2012. That's just one dude, like one guy made all of that money off the dairy industry. Now, I'm not trying to get all into anybody's business and your finances, but I was just wondering, show of hands, how many people made $22 million last year? One person, all right. So we have a $44 billion industry that's pushing products, you gotta watch those P's, that's pushing products on the public, and meanwhile, everybody is suffering. And I do mean everybody, humans and animals alike. Did you know that there's a growing body of evidence that there are links between dairy consumption and high cholesterol, acne, prostate cancer, diabetes, breast cancer, allergies, ear infections, respiratory infections, and other ailments that aren't even normally associated with dairy consumption? In other words, I know some people do know that, but in other words, scientific evidence is accumulating that contrary to what we've been told about the health aspects or the health benefits of dairy products, these products can be very harmful to human health. By far, though, the real victims of this multi-billion-dollar industry is the cows. In order to meet the human demand for cow milk and other dairy products, newborn calves must be torn away from their mothers so that the milk that was meant for them can be taken for our use. These mother cows have been known to call out for their babies for hours after being separated from them. The male calves who can't be used for milk production are dragged off and prepared for the veal crate, which is a small box that restricts the calf's movement so that its flesh will be more tender for our consumption. All this trauma, suffering, and death is inflicted on millions of these gentle creatures because of our obsession with dairy and meat products. Now, I realize that sometimes these videos can be a little difficult to watch, but compared to what's out there, this was really gentle. I don't know how many people have been educating themselves about the horrors, the absolute horrors of the meat and dairy and egg industries and other animal use industries. But there is lots of undercover footage that's been coming out of the farms and the slaughterhouses and stuff about how bad it really is. And I would suggest that if you don't know about this stuff, that you educate yourself, that you go and you find these videos. I mean, they're out there, and as far as I'm concerned, the time for, oh God, I don't want to see it, oh no, I don't want to know, like that time is over. It's over. Because if you're going to be using your time and your energy and your money and putting it into these industries that are causing so much suffering and pain and death, at least know what you're putting your money into. At least know. The old saying that knowledge is power is such a true statement, because knowing what goes on in the dairy industry means you can choose not to support it. You can make that choice. Use the power of your money to make the statement that you will no longer support a cruel and deceptive industry that's hurting so many of us, all of us, while benefiting only a few millionaires that are making a killing off of the pain and suffering of others. So we're all disconnected from each other. And we're so used to this disconnection that we can't even see it. I mean, we can't even see how disconnected we are. And if you looked around at the people living their lives around you, your neighbors, the people at your job, your family members, you would think that nobody cares about anything. But that's absolutely not true. Since I've gotten into activism, I have met a lot of other activists who care deeply about different things. I've met civil rights advocates who are working hard to fight against police brutality and racial profiling and other forms of discrimination that's racially based and class-based. I've met women's rights advocates who are working to rectify salary inequality and high rates of sexual assault against women in the military and other gender-related forms of discrimination. I've met LGBTQA activists fighting to stop workplace discrimination, hate crimes, and other crimes that are inflicted upon people based on sexuality. And I've met workers' rights advocates who are fighting for safe working conditions and a living wage for workers. And so I've met lots of people who care about lots of things. And there might even be people in this audience who care about some of those same things. And so, you know, the different activist groups are working within their different groups on these different issues and causes that mean a lot to them. But I think that what's missing from this is the acknowledgement that each of these different issues that people care about personally are all connected. I once heard an animal rights activist say that he wished that people would stop bringing other issues like racism and sexism into the animal rights arena. I've also heard racial justice advocates saying that gay rights is not our fight. The fact of the matter is that all of these forms of inequality and oppression stem from the same root problem. And it's what in my activism I like to call the power over others program, or poop for short. The Power Over Others program puts forth the notion that one group is somehow more valuable than another group based on some arbitrary characteristic. Whites are more valuable than non-whites, men are more valuable than women, humans are more valuable than animals, the rich are more valuable than the poor, the educated are more valuable than the uneducated, cisgendered people are more valuable than transgender people, people who are citizens are more valuable than undocumented people, able-bodied people are more valuable than differently able people, the young are more valuable than the old, the powerful are more valuable than the powerless, and this list just goes on and on and on. The Power Over Others program is the basis for all forms of inequality, exploitation, oppression, discrimination, and injustice being perpetrated on this planet today. But here's the thing. The reason why this Power Over Others program is able to exist is because we feed into it. We support it in our thoughts and in our actions, and therefore we are the ones that keep this program going, which is kind of ironic because the Power Over Others program is negatively affecting every single person on this planet today. So now you might be wondering why or what I meant when I said that we're all supporting it. And to this I say, we buy products of oppression whenever we purchase clothing, shoes, handbags, electronics, and other things that were produced in a sweatshop. I mean, we've heard about these sweatshops. We've heard about people in other countries having to work for 14, 18 hours a day, and even by their own country's economy, even by those standards, they are not getting paid enough money to even take care of themselves and buy food and take care of their families. We know this, and yet we still can't wait to go to the big, whatever store, I'm not naming names. We all can't wait to go to that store to buy those products that are the product of somebody else's oppression. And if you're buying chocolate, just know that many of the companies that are selling this chocolate are knowingly using child slave labor, in order to harvest and process their cacao beans. So you go into the convenience store or the grocery store or wherever and you get your piece of chocolate and you eat it and it's delicious, not knowing that you're eating the product of some child slavery on the Ivory Coast of Africa. And of course, since we're talking about veganism, right? Of course, people are eating the product of suffering and torture and death every time they consume meat, dairy, and egg, and other animal use products. The consumption of the bodies of animals is so widespread and so deeply entrenched. When people find out I'm vegan, they're like, oh man, I couldn't do that. That's too extreme, right? As if eating vegetables and fruits and nuts and grains and beans is more extreme than taking living, feeling, sentient animals, caging them, torturing them, killing them, ripping off their skin, grinding up their body parts, and then making them available for people to take home and cook and eat is more extreme than me making my kale salad. Come on. So I'm gonna go out on a limb here and make a very bold statement. And some people might not agree with it. What I want to say is that regardless of what you have eaten or drank or worn or whatever before you walk through this door, it's not your fault. It's not your fault because since the moment you were born, the meat, dairy, and egg industries and other animal use industries have been working their butts off to make the suffering of animals for our consumption seem as normal as possible. They do this by creating a culture of callousness, whereby the absolute violence inherent in animal exploitation can be overlooked or utterly disregarded. Many companies have even gone so far as to caricaturize the horrors and violence and death built into these industries with images like these. A pig smiling as it's being barbecued alive. A lobster pouring salt on itself and admiring itself in the mirror while it's cooked alive. A cow slicing itself into pieces and happy about it. A turkey pouring gravy on itself and enjoying being cooked. And I don't even know what's going on in this picture right here. Your guess is as good as mine. I have no idea. So from TV and radio commercials to the internet, newspapers, magazine ads, these industries are constantly programming us to accept the death, dismemberment, and consumption of animals as right and necessary and normal. And they're doing a great job of it. Most people don't even connect this ground up cow flesh with this cow. This pig's rib cage with this pig. This chicken's leg, right? Oh, it's working. With this chicken. And so I wanted to just tell a quick story to demonstrate how deeply ingrained this deception is. And some of you have heard the story, just bear with me, I'm sorry, I'm gonna tell it again. I was doing a tabling event with Aaron for Open the Cages. We were at a festival. And on the table, we had laid out all these different pamphlets, like, you know, about the chicken and turkey industry and about animals and entertainment and, you know, just all this great information. And so people were coming up to the table like, oh, what are you guys talking about? And, you know, we would tell them and they would, you know, walk off. And so this one woman came up and she was like, hey, what are you guys doing? And I was like, we're talking to people about animals. And she was like, really? Great, I love animals. And of course, you know, all the vegans in the room, like, I was thinking to myself, yeah, you mean you love doggies and kitties, right? And so I was like, oh, okay, great, you know. And she was like, no, I mean, I really love animals. And I was like, oh, okay. So you don't eat animals? And she was like, no, I don't eat animals. Of course not. And then at that point I started thinking, oh, okay, well, she's vegan. And so I was like, oh, my bad, I thought maybe you ate chicken. She was like, oh, I eat chicken. so I was like, but you know that chickens are animals. And she was like, don't say that, don't say it. And I was concerned. So I was like, no, you know that chickens are actually animals. And she was like, I don't want to hear that. This is going to make me feel bad. And she walked away. Like, she couldn't take it. You know, that's just an example of how deeply entrenched this violence towards animals is, and the way that it's just programmed into us to think that it's just normal. This is just what you do, right? And so it's not, I want to make this clear. We are talking about veganism, and vegan is a type of diet, but I want to make it clear that it's not just the meat, dairy, and egg industries that are participating in this deception. The fur industry would love, or would hate rather, for people to connect this little mink with this coat, right? Or this chinchilla with this coat. I mean, what would people wear to stay warm if somebody didn't kill innocent animals, rip off their skin, and make coats and boots and hats and things like that with it? We would be cold. Aquariums and aquatic parks would love for us to believe that the sea animals are living happy lives, trapped in a glass box, swimming around and around in circles, while human beings stand there and look at them. And let's not forget the sea mammals who are forced to do tricks to entertain us. And how are they trained by their trainers to do these tricks? Food deprivation. You ever seen the trainer toss a fish at the orca or at the dolphin? Well, guess what happens in training when they don't do the trick? No fish. You think they want to do tricks for us? They're afraid that if they don't do the tricks, they won't get food. The last time I went to the aquarium, I was sitting up in the stands, and there were only a handful of us there. Maybe it was during the day, I don't know, but there really weren't that many people there. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching as this trainer, she's got, her high energy and she's doing her little signals or whatever, and the dolphin is like jumping or spinning or whatever thing and balancing things on his nose. And then she would toss it a fish. Then it would do a trick and she would toss it a fish. And it would do a trick and she would toss it a fish. And I was sitting there watching this, and it occurred to me, this is this dolphin's life. Like, its life is doing tricks for some humans to get a fish. And it was at that point that I got up and I walked out, and I never went back, but I really started to look at a lot of the different ways that we are just using animals for whatever the heck we want. Circuses. Yeah, a lot of people, I talk to people, we were just doing the circus outreach down at the First Mariner Arena this week and last week, and there were a few people who walked by and said, I don't take my grandchildren to the circus anymore. And they wanted some kind of feedback, and we were like, thank you so much. And really, we felt like thank you so much, because for every person that says, I don't take my children to the circus anymore, or I don't take my grandchildren to the circus anymore, every single person is making a difference. Because my question to people, who think that, who are falling for the circus line, that we take great care of our animals, it's on the website. They take great care of their animals, and yet evidence has come out that they are using whips, which we see right in the circus, like the guy who's with the tigers, it's like whoosh, and but we're thinking that he's actually taking care of this animal. That they're using whips, they're using electric shock, they're using bull hooks, which if you've never seen them, are these sticks that have this metal hook at the end of it, the sharp metal hook. They're using food deprivation as well in order to train these animals to do these tricks that they're doing, these really unnatural tricks that they're doing for our entertainment. It's well known that the elephants that are retired from the circus have horrible bone and leg issues from being forced to stand up and put their whole weight, all these tons of weight, onto the back of their legs so humans can go, woo! What would possess a tiger, an animal covered in fur, to jump through a hoop of fire? Fear that if they don't jump through their hoop of fire, they're going to experience pain or food deprivation. Common sense would tell us that doing these tricks night after night after night, that being confined to a cage for hours and hours and hours while they are transported from one city to another city to another city to another city, and then made to do these unnatural tricks night after night after night after night, is not a good life for these animals. And let's not forget the zoo. We love the zoo, right? We get to go out and see all these exotic animals that we just wouldn't be able to see if they weren't at the zoo. All those animals living in tiny, cramped enclosures, suffering from extreme psychological damage, and this has been documented by zoologists. From the lack of stimulation, the lack of exercise, they're cut off from the herds and the packs and the other communities that they would normally be a part of if they were able to live in the wild. They're denied everything that's worth living, so that we can go and take our children and point at them and say, "Ooh, look at that tiger, look at that jaguar, look at that giraffe, isn't it pretty?" And then these zoos and nature centers have the nerve to say that these animals were rescued or wouldn't be able to survive in the wild, which is BS that they tell to us so that we feel pacified and we feel better about the fact that we can see how depressed and miserable they are when we walk past the enclosures at the zoo. You can see it, right? We've all seen it. And for anyone who's ever, who has as a part of their history or their heritage, captivity or enslavement, you know that it is far more desirable to take your chances living free than to live a so-called safe life in captivity. So, as a person who cares about everybody, and I do, like I love humans. Okay, there was a period of time for like a few months when I didn't love humans. It was rough. Like when I first started learning this stuff, I was like, why do we exist? Where is the meteor that's just gonna come and wipe us out? Or somebody make a virus or something, like take us out, right? But now I love humans again. And I love animals. I love the natural environment. I go out into nature as much as I can. And I love the planet, just in general. I just love being here. I love that we have this planet that we can all live on, that we're supposed to be sharing with the rest of the beings that also live on this planet. And because of the fact that I love everybody, the research for this presentation was really difficult. There were times when I cried, like just cried and cried and cried unconsolably over some of the things that I was learning that human beings are doing right now. There were times when I just stared blankly at the wall for hours, like just in amazement at the atrocities that human beings are capable of. But by far, the hardest research for me to do was the research that I had to do on animal experimentation. The animal research industry is so completely hidden from our site that we actually have no idea that the products that we buy, like shampoo, perfume, detergents, cleansers, lotions, over-the-counter medications, prescription drugs, and a lot of other products are tested on the animals first for safety before putting it out to the human public. And the really ironic thing about all this is that researchers are coming forward now and saying that this research that they did on the animals is not even relevant to the later studies that they end up doing on humans. There's no correlation. And so over 100 million animals who are confined in these laboratories and tortured, it's not even for a reason. There's no reason to even do it because there's no correlation between the animal research and the human research. So these mice, rats, frogs, dogs, cats, rabbits, hamsters, guinea pigs, monkeys, fish, birds, and other animals have chemicals injected into their eyes, are forced to inhale toxic chemicals, have holes drilled into their brains, and a lot worse than that. Just let me tell you, a lot worse than that. I would encourage you to do some research about what human beings are doing to these animals in the name of science. It's worse than you could ever imagine. This is nothing compared to the things that I saw that I couldn't even put on the screen because people might get sick seeing it. All of these things are allowed to happen. All of it, the circuses, the aquariums, the experimentation, the zoos, the eating, the milk, the everything, all of this is allowed to happen because of the Power Over Others program, which says that because these beings are not human beings, they don't deserve to have a life that's free of being caged and tortured and beaten and killed and eaten and otherwise used by us. To me, veganism is about more than a dietary choice, and it's about more than treating animals better. To me, veganism is about a shift away from the Power Over Others program where certain groups on the planet are seen as more valuable than other groups on the planet. It's about shifting your mind away from accepting this as being true. Veganism gives us all an opportunity to take the first steps towards a world where true justice and equality can take place. Because we understand that we're all connected and we respect and honor those connections. Having the ability as humans, being able to choose to be vegan, is more powerful than we can even imagine. To take our energy and our money and put it into a lifestyle that's free and doesn't make a huge profit off of the suffering and death of others, we could literally change the world. And what could be more powerful than that?